The Western-backed Shah rapidly became unpopular, and the nation became an increasingly centralized royal state, which was heavily protected by a lavishly financed army and security services.
I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think the way the American foreign policy has worked is the following. This is like not Iran. It has happened everywhere. In Pinochet, Chile, in the dictators in Latin America, elsewhere in the world. The U.S. usually, in the initial periods, it reinforces dictatorship. Okay, only thereafter to destroy them. It is in the nature of the way the U.S. deals with these dictators. They promote them in times of instability, make them a strong man, and then after they have a foothold and after they are sure that everything is in place, that they are in charge, they just destroy them and go for another group.
The first radical anti-Shah demonstrations happened in October 77, after the death of Imam Khomeini's son, Mustafa. Activists numbered perhaps a few hundred in total, but over the coming months they grew to a massive several thousand demonstrators in most cities of Iran.
Well, I'm a political scientist, so for me it was a great experience to a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness a revolution and be what I call a participant observer, because I went to all the demonstrations and it was great. I spoke Persian, so people know I was American. They made sure I had a front row seat, although they were very protective, because they never knew when there was going to be shooting or tear gas, and I only was in one where we were shot at, and several where it was tear gas, and so we learned all the tear gas tricks. You always carry, some of those limon, the fresh ones, the little ones, and you put those on your eyes and they counteract the tear gases. All these tricks are on cloth, actually.
The first casualties suffered in major demonstrations against the Shah came in January 1978. Hundreds of Islamist students and religious leaders in the city of Qom were furious over a story in the government-controlled press they felt was defamatory. The army was sent in, dispersing the demonstrations and killing several students.
No, I can remember a demonstration when the army did march. I think it was some sort of Rangers Special Forces unit, and there was a demonstration heading down one road, and the army marched rather than down another road to intersect it. And then there was a lot of firing. And I, like pretty well everywhere else, dashed into the closest place of safety, which in my case was an apartment building. And I remember sitting in the entrance hall of this apartment building as gunfire went on for 5-10 minutes sporadic, but initially quite intense, and we all wondered what the hell was going on and what was going to happen. When we came out, the army had gone. There was no blood in the street. As I think people reported that a few people had been injured. But as far as I could make out, the army at that time just fired in the air to try and disperse the demonstrators rather than using lethal force.
According to the Shiite customs, memorial services are held 40 days after a person's death. In mosques across the nation, calls were made to honor the death of the students. Thus, on February 18th, groups in a number of cities marched to honor the fallen and protest against the rule of Shah.
Obscured most of the truth about the Middle East and about Iran, so that you can say Iran had a religious population. Nobody knew that. There were no books on Shiism. When I started studying the Middle East in the late 50s, there was one book on the subject of Shiism. It was a book by a man named Donaldson, and it dealt with Iraq. There was no book about Shiism in Iran. There was no book about Shiism in general. There was no awareness, other than what people would say in travel accounts, of things relating to the piety of Iranians. There was certainly no understanding of the Hoseh or the clerical establishment in Iran, or the degree to which Ayatollahs had networks that reached down all the way down to the village and neighborhood level.
By summer 1978, the level of protests had been at a steady state for 4 months. This mounted to an almost fully mobilized network of pious Iranian Muslims. Worse for the momentum of the movement, on June 17, 1978, the 40-day mourning cycle of mobilization of protests, where demonstrators were killed every 40 days as they mourned the dead of earlier demonstrations. By August 78, protests peaked into high gear, and the number of demonstrators mushroomed to hundreds of thousands.
Because the Shah was a steadfast ally, we didn't have a real issue with his human rights. Carter did, but up until then we didn't. Even Carter would hedge his bets on that. He was such a, he was our great dictator, and he was doing everything. And again, but it's the important issue is it's within the Cold War context. This has very little to do with the domestic or the Middle East as a region. It has everything to do with him as a bulwark, sitting along the border of the Soviet Union. He's key for intelligence collection on the Soviet Union, our signal stations. He's key for containing Soviet expansion towards Middle East oil, which was a huge concern because it was very much the Achilles oil then and now is Achilles heel of the West, and they're afraid the Soviet Union take it, secure the Persian Gulf oil. They could sort of backdoor squeeze, cut off Europe or Japan. And the Shah played to all those concerns and played very well. So why change the horse? If the one you're riding works just perfectly fine.
I was the person that was responsible for reporting to the President of the United States about what was going on. I wasn't the only person, but I was the principal. That was my job. And I wrote memos saying, there are demonstrations. There are problems. We're seeing signs that things are not going well. It doesn't seem to be getting better. But I do remember vividly that in August of 1978, which was quite a long ways into it, though the biggest demonstrations hadn't happened yet, Ambassador Sullivan was on vacation and came home, and I took him into the White House to see Mr. Brzezinski, the National Security Advisor. And I was in the room with Brzezinski and Sullivan, and Sullivan said to him, Brzezinski asked him, what's going on in Iran, and what's the situation? And he said, don't worry about it. The Shah has it all under control, and you have nothing to worry about.
By late summer 1978, the movement to overthrow had become viable in the minds of many Iranians, boosting support that much more. A general strike in October resulted in the paralysis of the economy, with vital industries being shut down, sealed the Shah's fate. By autumn, popular support for the revolution was so powerful. A military government headed by General Ghulam Reza Ashari replaced conciliatory Prime Minister Sharif Emami.
And Sullivan at the State Department, I think the Secretary of State sort of shared Sullivan's views, perhaps not as stridently as Sullivan did. But what they did do is bring in a guy by the name of Stan Escudero, who was a later ambassador to, I think, Azerbaijan and some other, one other country in the Caucasus after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And Escudero was a kind of a controversial figure in the sense that he had been an outspoken critic in the mid-70s of our support, essentially of putting all the American national security eggs in the Shah's basket and putting so much on him. It goes back to your question about the wisdom of, with such a flawed leadership of U.S. putting everything on him. And Escudero was critical of that. But it almost terminated his career because it ran counter to what then Secretary of State Kissinger was advocating, U.S. policy and the Ford and tail end of the Nixon administration. But he was also a fluent Farsi speaker. And so when the revolution happened, Sullivan asked for Escudero, or somebody like Escudero who comes in, to infiltrate the crowds, which he does, specifically to try to get a sense of what the ground truth is with the demonstrators. And Escudero ends up reporting back repeatedly to Sullivan on, he meets religious leaders, he meets student leaders, he gets a very good sense of the opposition to the Shah, reports back to Sullivan, and essentially convinced with Sullivan's views that the Shah's done. This is a widespread opposition movement. It goes across not only religious but all the stratas, from the Bazaar to the Golem and the religious movement, and even in elements within the military. And so that influences Sullivan's decision as well, sort of reinforces his view that the U.S. needs to look beyond the Shah. But that's not what Brzezinski and Washington wanted to hear.
The time that almost everybody realized there was a problem that maybe it had gone too far was at the time of the Ashwa Teshwa riots in early December. News came out that they were going to have a massive demonstration. They said they were going to have it. The Army threatened to stop it, and it was the general, the senior general. Well, there are two things. The senior general in the Army went over to Khomeini in the end in February, and that's why all the generals were caught and shot. But there were other serious, the armored commander would have fought all the way through, but he didn't know. He was killed at Jaleh Square when the revolutionaries came out in September 11th. So things were getting bad. When the demonstrations took place, there were 1,200,000 people in the streets.